in Jade Quarry. Just that. Eventually, it gets a little bit boring, and you can do other stuff while you're doing it.
Yeah.
So, who played any kind of melee characters that would like to? Because I mean, we've been going over a lot of ranged, but I heard a lot of talk where I was playing in regular PvE and whatnot, and they were saying that I mean, there's no strong reason to go Guardian or Warrior or anything like that if you could just go simply an Ellie and just kite and just constantly hit. I mean, people were saying they were able to take on, 4 different centaurs just running around in circles.
Kellen,
Yeah, I had a lot to say about melee classes in general. I played both a warrior and a guardian throughout the entire beta weekend, and some things I noticed about melee in general that some of the people on the beta forums and on Reddit noticed too is that in PvE, when you're going mob to mob, just your average, like an ice worm or a centaur or something like that, you can kill it. It's not a problem. The second you get into something that requires more than, 10 or so swings with your sword and, once you've cycled through your abilities, that's when a problem really starts to happen with melee, because you get these big damages that are going on you, and there's not a lot of ways to dodge it or mitigate it in a lot of the time. The warrior will have a block occasionally with their shield, but again, once you're out of dodge and once you're out of your abilities and you're just down to your auto attack, there's not a lot you could do besides trying to kind of circle strafe. And if you're in a boss, that doesn't really matter at all.
Did your auras actually help a lot? Because I know that the Aura of Aegis whatnot had a block every 5 seconds, I believe.
Sometimes it'll happen. It was like every 10 seconds or something like that. I didn't get far enough to get a lot of auras and stuff like that. It did help once I started leveling up. It really did help. But the best example I have, and we talked about this before the podcast, is I was like a level 11, 12 Norn Guardian. And we had this big old ice boss monster that everyone was fighting as a part of a final event. And what this boss monster did is he would regularly spawn a bunch of AoEs around him, and then he would have these big, hard-hitting, kind of short AoE attacks at close range. Now, if you're a caster, your job was to sit out there and just nuke him as much as possible. There wasn't a lot of, skill involved with that. And occasionally he would do these, like, okay, here's a circle next to a circle next to a circle next to a circle, all in this area of AoE. Well, it was really early. You could get out of the way in about a second or two. Otherwise, it would instant kill you. But you could, dodge out of the way. Not a problem. If you were a melee character, though, you'd go up against this guy, and you'd kind of be whacking on him for a while. You'd be doing damage, and it'd be good, and you're getting conditions, and you feel really good about yourself. And then, bam, just like that, you would be down on the ground. Because he had this, short-range AoE attack that would just kill everyone who was next to him. And I think that the problem with melee is not that melee is underpowered, overpowered, whatever. There's no particular problem with melee. The problem is that they have not yet designed these encounters so that you can so that they're telegraphing these melee close range attacks, be that with regular mobs or boss characters. Because when you're at range, you get these nice little circles that you can avoid. That's easy. You get these big spells that they cast, and they usually take some time to get over to you so you can dodge out of the way. In melee, they have these instant attacks that are very powerful. Unless you know exactly the rotation of these attacks, because I did a bunch of other events where, we tried and we wiped a couple times, and eventually you started to learn, okay, this is when he's going to do this is when he's not going to do this, when he's doing this, he's definitely not going to do this or do that. And you learn that stuff, but there's no easy way to just telegraph. The enemies are just telegraphing, telling you when to move and when to get out of the way. I think that's the problem. If ArenaNet comes and does this thing where they say, okay, here's when this big attack is coming up. All the melee guys can get out of the way and then come back in and start wailing on them. They don't even have to change damage mitigation on heavy armor. They don't have to change how melee works. They just have to give you more indication of when this stuff is going to happen.
Being able to learn the choreography and whatnot of the fights and everything.
Right, yeah, and without it being trial and error.
Yeah.
I think I remember in Guild Wars 1, I did not played a lot of Guild Wars 1, so don't quote me on anything of this, but in Guild Wars 1 you had on enemies, when they were about to cast a spell or something that was big, it would actually pop up over their head with a little bar, right?
Yeah, correct. There was a casting time or whatnot.
Right, yeah, you could tell what the enemy was
or something like that.
Exactly, you could tell what the enemy was going to do. I think there really needs to be something like that in Guild Wars 2 that extends to melee, because AoE's already, sorry, ranged attackers already have this telegraph. They have a big circle. They have spells that they can look for. Melees don't have that right now. There just needs to be something.
Yeah, and Guild Wars 1 definitely did revolve around the type of monsters you're going against, because, you know, if you were going against a certain, you know, an X amount, you know, an X monster or whatnot, you knew and expected what was going to happen because they had that, like you mentioned, that bar, so you're able to see the skills, see what they use. That way you kind of had a mental notation of what to expect. And, I mean, I didn't play a whole lot of melee. I did try the thief a little bit, but I played a lot more PvP. And when I was playing PvP, you don't have the, you know, the telegraph or whatnot, you know, showing the skills being used or whatnot. But playing against other characters in PvP, it's almost like that meta game kind of style where, you know, if I was playing a Mesmer and whatnot, because I played Mesmer so much, I knew when they were going to use a skill. I knew when they were going to do something, so I kind of was able to dodge
skills,
and roll
right?
out of the way beforehand.
Fighting other characters, I mean, other people, you know their skills based on their weapon.
Exactly. And being able to adapt to it so quickly. And yeah, I definitely agree with Kellen.
I should make one note that when playing some PvE against like little monsters too, this I remember in the Nord starting area there were these like jaguars or something you had to kill. I don't really remember, but they would actually telegraph their hard hitting hits. It was weird because like some mobs would just whack, you're dead, done, But then there were some mobs that they would kind of like have this weird kind of charge up thing, and I'm like, okay, I'll get out of the way. Then they do their leap, and if I didn't get out of the way, then they take like half my health down. So I think this could be chalked up to something. Maybe they just haven't implemented it yet. Maybe there's been a lot of changes. Maybe they're just kind of playing catch up, because it seemed like some mobs had it and some mobs didn't. So there you go.
Maybe it wasn't their big attack.
Yeah, I mean, that could be it too, but it seemed like the big attacks for certain mobs were telegraphed, and then you had other mobs. I remember especially the ice brood wolves. They would do this little leap that would take down half your health, and there's no way you could tell when they were going to do it. It was like their regular attacks would be going, and then all of a sudden they just go leap really quick, and then all of a sudden half your health would be gone. So.
Well, not to stray off the topic too much, but Ben, what class did you play?
I was big on Elementalist. I played both Staff and the Dagger mostly. I really liked Dagger, even though it was more or less a, suicide.
Now, as an Elementalist, you're going to be focusing on DPS a lot, right?
Not necessarily, actually. I mean, DPS is a lot of it, but there's ways that you can spin it so it's a lot of just support.
Honestly, I saw a lot. I think Ellie had probably the most kind of like team healing skills that I saw any other profession have in general. Besides the engineer. The engineer had the what was it? Healing
turret?
Turret, that's what it was. And being able to use that meta pack where you drop down health and buffs and everything too. But when I played the Elementalist for that little bit, I did see a ton of healing skills for the water attunement.
Pretty much like when I'm playing Dagger Elementalist, I would kind of focus on DPS, but if I'm with a group, I would focus on getting behind or in front of them and then pushing them back into my group to get the kill. And that really worked really well.
There was a lot of movement modifiers on the dual daggers and Elementalist. You could push people around a lot. You could just get around the battlefield super quick. I got some other stuff to say on that, but I want to let you finish.
And then a lot of guild, like when I played Staff, and I played mostly World versus World. What I did most of the time was I'd run around with Staff, and I would do a lot of I guess fort harass, and that people, if you're storming a fort, you're gonna want to kill the invaders on top. So I did a lot of placing AoEs on the fort so they wouldn't be able to get close. And then of course when people are working the rams, you would be able to heal the people there. So I'd switch into water attunement, drop all my heals onto the person who's doing the thing so they wouldn't die. And that was a lot, and that would keep them alive and help to get the door down in time before everyone died.
I did a
Sounds
lot of
very
PvE.
different. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was
I've
gonna
got a lot to say
compare.
on this topic, so you go ahead and talk and get your stuff out of the way.
I was gonna compare the Elementalist that he's been explaining to the one in Guild Wars 1, where you start off starting with like your basic damage, but in higher end PvE runs, you're mostly running as a tank, really, as an Elementalist.
Hmm.
Like you're running Elementalist Warrior, Elementalist Monk, and
That's true.
like
I
you
forgot
are
could build
you are tanking.
Sounds like fun.
I mean, that's not the way they wanted Elementalists to be in Guild Wars 1, I think.
But I mean, that's the problem with the cross professions. I mean, Assassins ran everything really fast and ran to the boss and killed it. Elementalists tanked all the mobs. Dervishes just AoE'd everything. There were Elementalists who also nuked, but really, like, just people finding ways to change sort of what is meant to just fit the playstyle, and that comes with experience. Like, Elementalists weren't tanks at the beginning. Assassins weren't running everything right off the bat. So
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
I guess.
Metagame. Yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see what metagame happens with Guild Wars 2, because there's just so much different stuff, and that kind of goes into what I was going to say about PvP, is when I ran Dual Daggers and Elementalist in PvP, because I did a lot of structured PvP towards the end of the beta, because I wanted to make the most of my last hours with it. I didn't want to be sitting there in World versus World casting the same spells over and over. I didn't want to be in the world trying to find somebody for dynamic events. I just wanted to get in there. I wanted to have PvP fun, so I did a lot of that. Anyway, I got Dual Daggers Elementalist in PvP, and I ran that build that we did so long ago of, the super speed Elementalist. And what I noticed is I just stayed in air attunement all the time. I didn't really switch. I did some fire stuff occasionally, but what I found myself doing was actually staying away from the fight. And what I would do is you have so many speed abilities available to you in air attunement. You have this thing called Ride Lightning, and for anybody who doesn't know, Ride Lightning, if you don't target it at anyone, can just surge you forward in a straight line faster than anything else in the game. So, I mean, you can get out of pretty much any situation just by hitting that button and just getting away. Then maybe you hit your blink if you're still under, heavy fire. So what I was doing is I would just run around the battlefield. When they'd capture a point, I'd kind of wait for like a couple seconds for them to get out of there. I'd get back in there, neutralize the point. If I could stick around, then I'd get the point. And it was really effective. I would just ninja capture all these points and completely keep them from getting any points at all. And then I did notice whenever it was a one-on-one situation, I was not really built to take on, like, more than like one person at a time usually, and I would usually just end up escaping. But it was something that was a little more, it was meta strategy. It was not, oh, let's roll with the team and provide support and AoEs and stuff like that, which is what, the Elementalist is quote-unquote supposed to do. I was just running around, being the fast little person that I was. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, because I know that Ben went through a lot of World vs. World events and everything, and one thing that I did a lot of the time was just going through PvE stuff, and that's usually actually the only way that I leveled up. But one thing about when I was playing PvE, and especially after playing other MMOs and whatnot, just the original Guild Wars, WoW, Aeon, and whatnot, and Warhammer. But when I was playing the PvE in Guild Wars 2, I noticed that it was a lot more difficult than, other, I guess, MMOs in general. You could not just stand there and auto-attack as a caster at all. You had to constantly be moving, you had to constantly be using your snares and whatnot, just playing smart in general. At first, I'd probably died, a couple times and whatnot, but as soon as I got a hang of the combat, being able to understand the skills and using little tricks for every profession, I was able to last a lot longer, which honestly I really, really liked. It added something refreshing in general when it came down to it. But probably one of my biggest quarrels when it came to PvE was, and it was a bittersweet notation at that, but was the dynamic events. with no quests at all. I mean, starting off